name is Sophie and today I'm going to be talking about my July wrap-up. So last month in my June wrap-up, it was either my last or second to last video. I talked about how June was my best reading month of the year yet because not of how many books I read, but because I liked most the books I read and was overall a really good reading month. Then July came around and this month was even better. So first I'm going to give you some stats and then we're going to talk about the books I read this month. I read 8 books and of those 4 were fantasy, 2 were horror, 1 was contemporary and 1 was sci-fi. And I liked most of them, only 1 of them was below 3 stars. And I have my little bullet journal here. My average rating for them was 3.92 without counting the reread, because the reread is obviously a 5-star, so I don't count the rereads. And I read a total of 4,561 pages this month, which averages out to 570 pages per book. Which, like, for an average, that's really, really high. So yeah, let's get right into it. First book I read this month was Bloody Rose by Eames, and I gave this one 5 stars. It was just so good to read. I loved it so much. I read this for a Brazilian readathon that ended on July 4th, and I finished this one on July 4th. And just this book was just amazing, but also being part of that readathon was just like the best readathon I've ever been part of. It was so fun. Like, the reading rush is so behind. Brazilian readathons are like killing it. But overall, I just truly love this book. I read Kings of the Wild last year and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but I just didn't have like that emotional connection that I always need to give a book 5 stars. Just need that emotional connection. I need to feel so much for the story and the characters for it to really be 4.5 or 5 stars or a favorite. And this one did it, even though I have to say the beginning was messy and rocky. Like, the pacing was super off in the beginning. It felt like the book, it knew where it wanted to end, but to get there it had to go through a very rocky path that I knew it had to go through. That it kind of did, but also the execution wasn't that good. But then we get to this big event that they have to, this big thing that they have to kill, this big prize that they're trying to get. From there, the book is just phenomenal. Like, the scene where they're trying to kill the thing is amazing. After that, we start exploring the characters more, we start exploring their dynamics more. And it's just overall such a good book. I love the ending. It's not a cop-out. I can see some people feeling like it's a cop-out. I personally don't think so, but I truly love this book. I think, even though I like her main character, the point of view of the story, there's only one. Even though I like her, she wasn't the most interesting or the most developed, but I think that's a trend with Eames. He kind of chooses the most reserved character to be the point of view of his story, and she was a nice window because she was new into the band. She was a nice window into their dynamic. I just wish she was a little bit more interesting, but Rose and Tam and Kira's dynamic, Rose and everybody's dynamic, just the final battle, just wow, I sobbed by the end, and also a little bit in the middle. Just overall such a good book, and I loved it so much. Next, I read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and that is a gothic horror book set in 1950s Mexico, and it had everything to be an amazing book. Everything it had. The atmosphere, it had the social commentary, I would say. The beginning of this book was good. It had the atmosphere, it had the horror-ish elements, but it just has a trope I hate in horror. If I say what it is, it's a spoiler, but it's a ending trope, like the way the ending happens, that it happens quite a lot in horror. I don't like that trope. I think it kind of cheapens the horror element. It becomes a little bit more superhero-ish, which I enjoy in superhero stories, not in horror. The horror elements just fell flat. The story was absurdly predictable. I didn't feel any connection to the story or the characters. The romance was so half-assed. And overall, I just gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. It's not good. It's not horrible, but it's not good either. Which is sad to say about a horror book written by a Mexican author, set in Mexico with gothic elements, which I love, but this overall just did not work for me. Next book I read was also a horror, and it was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I've read all other Riley Sager books except for his first one, Final Girls, which I'm not sure I want to read yet, and I didn't like his second book, Last Time I Lied. I really liked his third book, Lock Every Door, and Home Before Dark was also really good. It was just such a fun story. I loved that type of setup that Home Before Dark had, which if you've watched The Haunting of Hill House, the TV show, it's the TV show. It's it. That's it. That's the basic premise. It's the same. I've seen people say like, oh, they have such similar vibe. It's so good. They have the similar basis of the plot. Like, it's a little bit too similar. Both of them have a character that wrote that had a best-selling book about their time in the house. They also had names for the people in the house. It was also about the children in the house, the child, there was only one child, coming back to the house after so many years later. There was also a body in the house. You know, there were just so many similarities. But the ending was quite different, thank God. But even though they are very similar, that setup is just so fun to read, honestly. The horror elements were just so delicious. I'm very rarely scared by horror, like almost never. This one didn't scare me either, but I think horror is so fun, and I had so much fun reading this book. I have to say, I don't remember the finale. I remember kind of like the people and the things in place. I don't remember their motives. I don't remember what happened when, because I just read it so fast. I was so desperate to finish it, just like to get to the next page. I just don't remember the ending. I don't remember the big conclusion, and that's kind of driving me insane. But I just think it doesn't have like super well developed characters, but it does have this very nice atmosphere. It's a very nice horror atmosphere. It's a haunted house, and it's overall just a really fun book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I reread Words of Radiance the second time this year and the third time overall. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's the second book in the Stormlight Archive, my favorite series of all time, and I'm rereading. I've been rereading the series in the hopes to have read all 3 books 3 times by the release of Rhythm of War, book 4. So I can also read that one 3 times. Also read this in February, so it's in all the books I read so far in 2020 video. Want to check that out, but yeah, this book is perfect. It's phenomenal. It's perfect. I literally have nothing else to say. Obviously, 5 out of 5 stars. This does not count in my average rating though, but it is big, so that pumped up the average pages I read this month. Next book I read is my favorite book of the year so far, hands down, and it's The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. Yes, I got an arc. I haven't been like that vocal about it on Twitter if you follow me on Twitter, because I always post these videos also on Twitter, because like the arc wasn't given to me specifically, it was given to me by a friend, which is completely legal, by the way. If somebody gifts you an arc, they just can't sell it. That's completely legal, by the way. I just don't want to like announce it, because I don't know, because they're not giving arcs to too many people, so it wouldn't like be fair of me, kind of. Yeah, I don't know. But The Burning God, man, I reread Poppy War this year. I hated it the first time I read it, book 1 in the series. I read Dragon Republic this year, which I have an entire vlog for, by the way, just me freaking out about the book for 40 minutes. It's great, and absolutely loved it also. And then Burning God is just, if you've read Mistborn, it's Hero of Ages level series finale. It's so perfect for what the series needs, and it's heartbreaking. I finished it, I think 2 a.m. I literally sobbed, like hiccup sobbing, for a good hour after. I got dehydrated and lightheaded after just crying so much, because even though it broke my heart, it's such a fantastic ending. I think it's also the only ending that it could have while also being satisfying and true to the story it's telling, because it's such a brutal story. It's about the horrors of war, it's about the horrors of imperialism and colonialism, and it's perfect. There was a point about halfway through where I thought this particular plot point was a little bit too abruptly resolved, but it had the appropriate consequences to carry the second half of the book to the amazing finale it had, so I'm not mad about that. And if you read The Burning God and you get to that point, I'm just saying, I don't think it could have been done any other way, so just keep that in mind. But it's simply a phenomenal book. The Dragon Republic was already so well received, so widely loved, But The Burning God, it just takes what you had in with the traumas that Rin and the people had in the Poppy War. It builds up with with everything that happened in the trauma of the Dragon Republic, and it just built this fucking fantastic story. And it had all the appropriate payoffs, character-wise, plot-wise, just world-wise. I don't think it could have ended any other way, and the ending was absolutely phenomenal. It's just one of the best books I've ever read. It's now one of my favorite series, even though I hated the Poppy War the first time I read it, which is so insane to me now, seeing as out of the 58 books I've read so far, The Burning God is my favorite of all of them. I will say, everybody that's posting online like, I cried my eyes out, I couldn't believe it, I'm destroyed, I'm like, my soul is crushed, they are absolutely right, and you should be afraid. I finished The Burning God on Friday, and the reading rush was going to start on Monday, and I was planning on to participate on that, so I picked up a quick book that I could read in one day, and I read Clap When You Lend all Saturday afternoon. Finished it Saturday afternoon as well, and it was just, I was loving the beginning. I was loving the writing in the beginning, but honestly, writing is like, you know, that list kind of in your head, which like the thing you value most, which for me is character. Then it depends on the book, but usually character dynamics, world, plot, something writing. Writing's like on the bottom for me. So while the writing was beautiful, and I did notice that in the beginning, it was just, my brain just doesn't notice pretty writing, because I don't care. I personally prefer invisible prose so that we can focus on building the story and the characters, and that's usually what works for me. So Clap When You Land, it is a story written in verse, meaning it is a narrative, but it's all poetry, but it is a narrative story, and it's set in the Dominican Republic, and two sisters that they didn't know the other existed, they find each other, one living in New York, the other's living in Dominican Republic, and they meet each other, and they kind of don't get along at first because their dad died in a plane crash. So Clap When You Land. The title has a beautiful significance to the story that I already forgot, because that type of stuff just does not stick to my brain. I gave this book 3.5 stars because while it was a really good book, I finished it thinking, I really like that. That was a really good book. I really like that. That type of story written in verse, poetry, that type of story that's more about the themes rather than the characters themselves or the setting they're in, these things they have to do, those just, in a few days, they just get out of my head and I kind of forget about them. So I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars, even though it's all on me. This rating is all on me. It's because just that is not my thing. It's the same exact thing happened when I read The Poet X by the same author. I read it in a day, thought it was a really good book. A week later, I was like, yeah, but that's not my thing. I don't really remember it that well anymore because that's not just something that sticks with me. So I lowered the rating again. That's just a trend with me, basically. So don't fault the book for that. The book's actually really beautiful and really well written. It's just not my thing. Next book I read was The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Another one basically responsible for my high average pages of the month. And I tabbed this one. I buddy read this with a friend, and I really like this book. I just think it had the focus on the wrong things, which kind of made me feel a little bit underwhelmed by the end, because what really made this book for me was Eid, one of the main characters, Sabrin, the queen of this country, their dynamic, their position in their court, and Tane, this girl from the other side of the world. They were what made this book for me. The dragons and the Tane's conflict with it all, and Eden Sabrin's relationship and dynamic with each other and with the entire court therein, that's what made this book for me. But this book is about like the return of the Nameless One, which is like a big ass dragon that destroyed their world, and so we need to kind of go to other directions of the plot to properly build up the Nameless One's return. It's not a spoiler. If you're gonna read a book where the Nameless One, he's the big bad guy, he's gonna return. There were some parts of this book that I absolutely loved. I was so enraptured by them, but there were other parts of the story where I was just like, okay, can we get back to like Eden Sabrin or Tane because I don't care about Loth. Nick Clay's got real boring real quick, and I liked the politics when we were with Ede and Sabrin, but other than that, it was just a little bit underwhelming because they weren't nearly as interesting as Ede and Sabrin. The ending was so rushed. It was so underwhelming. It was so quick. This book is 800 pages, and I think the final battle lasted 3 chapters. 3 quick chapters, and I truly did enjoy Ede and Sabrin, their relationship and dynamic, and their time in court, but every time they were apart, the book got really boring. And every time we were with like Nick Clay's at some point got boring as well. And Loth is the absolute blandest character. I truly just did not care for him. There were some reveals that I loved. Mythology and the religion of the Queen Sabrin and her whole realm and shit, that was super cool. The mythology and world were super cool, but just like the conflict just wasn't that well resolved, and there were so many parts where we were spending time in one place but we could be spending time with so much more interesting people in another place. Overall, I give this book 4.5 stars, but I kind of feel let down by it because of the ending and all the time we spent away from Ede and Sabrin. Last book I read in July is Long Way to a Smiling Planet. Finally a book my hand can hold without hurting. I've been aware of this book, and I've been with this book in my TBR for years now, I think since 2016, but I just could never find it. It's never been available in the Amazon in my country, and there's pretty much no other way I can buy books in English other from Amazon. But I've always had this book on my radar, and I've always wanted to read it. And then in the beginning of the year, I went to Rio de Janeiro. Y'all call it Rio. I go there every year basically, and there's this little hidden bookstore in a place called Downtown. I always go there because it's like a strictly English bookstore. It only has books in English, and I was just like browsing the shelf and I found this one, which I've been looking for years. Not even Amazon has it, and that little hidden tiny bookstore has it. I'm still shocked that I was able to find this book in that kind of place, but I finally read it. Everybody raves about it. I read this in the last 2 days of July, and I really enjoyed it. It's just such a nice story with such a nice found family element, which is my favorite trope. And it has many interesting characters. My favorites were Sissix and Kizzy. They were just so nice. The world and the different alien species were just also so cool. Their time in the ship was so cool. Dr. Chef is a gem. And overall, this book was just so much fun and such a nice time. I just would describe this book as nice. Not that it isn't a great book, it's just such a nice, it's like cozy. It's fun and nice and wholesome, and it can just feel the warmth from these characters. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. So yeah, this was my July wrap up. This was like my best reading month of the year. I just read so many good books in a row, and a new favorite of the year, which is just like so great. Favorite of the year so far, by the way, because I'm sure Rhythm of War is going to be my favorite book of the year, which is Rhythm of War is the next book in the Stormlight Archive. My favorite series of all time, the Words of Radiance, is part of that series, and I'm so glad I read Burning God now because it comes out the same day Rhythm of War comes out. So if I read it, Rhythm of War, and then Burning God was just pale in comparison because Rhythm of War is Rhythm of War. It's a Stormlight Archive book. Everything else fails in comparison. So I'm just super glad I read it now. It's such a phenomenal book, phenomenal story. I'm so glad I read most of these books this month, and it was overall such a great reading month. And yeah, my name's Sophia, and I'll see you next time. Bye!